to
Well, you
this
don't have your skyline. Katie doesn't get to see your beautiful skyline.
afterwards.
It's raining right now. We have rain going.
Okay, I think we're
Okay.
recording. Yeah.
Are you recording? Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And if you're in the here and now, you're welcome as well. This is Grant Cameron, and I'm speaking to you from God's country, beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm joined by my co-host, who's high above the skyline over Salt Lake City, up in the penthouse. And Cindy Vole, there it is. Look at this. She just moved it. I mean, I'm still not packed, but she's there. Welcome, Cindy. And we've got a very busy guest today, and a very important guest. I think everybody knows the function that she works for. So let's get right to it. You can do the introduction, and we'll get going on this exciting interview.
Yes. So I met Katie at MUFON and Contact in the Desert. Katie is she's the CEO of RMRR, is the author of Letters of Love and Light, co-author of Snippy the Horse, A King Family Legacy, YouTube, Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige. So Katie, what is RMRR again?
Rocky Mountain Ranch Research.
Okay, got it.
Wow.
All right, so her bio. Katie Paige has personal ties to the Rocky Mountain Ranch in Colorado, formerly known as Clearview Ranch, which predates Skinwalker Ranch by over a decade. This connection has sparked her interest in ufology as she seeks answers about her experiences and the events at the ranch. She serves as the CEO of the Rocky Mountain Ranch Research and is a co-author on the UAP SETI podcast alongside Jason, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Jason
Gilmat.
Gilmat.
Jason Gilmat, also Canada.
Oh,
Good.
Jason Gilmat and Michael Glosson. Katie has made appearances on several television shows, including History Channel, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, The Unexplained with William Shatner, Travel Channel's UFO Witness, Gaia Beyond Belief with George Norrie, Small Town Monster on the Trail of UFO, Night Visitors and UFO Revisited, as well as in Ron James's film, Accidental Truth and Accidental Truth Next. She conducts independent investigations and research through her Rocky Mountain Ranch Research Foundation and has presented at numerous conferences. Additionally, she has been featured on many radio shows and podcasts, including Coast to Coast with George Knapp and Chang Wag with Paul
Wag.
Chinwag with Paul. Okay, is that this? No, Giamatti. Katie is the author.
Giamatti. Paul Giamatti. Yeah.
Okay, Katie is the author of Letters of Love, Light, 4 decades of UFO encounters, experiences, sightings shared with ufologist Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, and co-author Snippy the Horse, A King Family Legacy. She is currently writing her third book titled The Rocky Mountain Ranch, Crafts, Cattle, Cryptids, and Cover-Ups. Katie holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Visual Communication. Let's welcome Katie. She's a badass. I'm so fortunate to know her. She's just so knowledgeable.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you,
And
Grant, for
beautiful.
having me.
And beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind. Fill up that head of mine. Woo.
I got lots of questions on your mutilation stuff. I got some really
Okay,
good-
all right.
So,
We'll just jump right into it.
okay, yeah.
Cattle mutilation is something I kind of avoided for a long time because we had so many pioneers. Linda Moulton Howe. She actually got her start as an investigative journalist out there in Elbert County in the ranch of my childhood. She was a journalist covering the rash of mutilations at the time, and the height of it was from 1975 to 1978. Giving away my age a little bit, but I'm 9 to 12 years old during that time. and my mom dated the gentleman that owned this property out there. So, we were threatening war not to talk about it. I didn't know anybody knew anybody about it until I purchased this book right here, Hunt for the Skinwalker by Colm Kelleher, PhD, and George Knapp, and started reading about the ranch of my childhood and other hot spots. There's a chapter called Other Hot Spots, and I knew it was the ranch because of the strange dynamics of the family. My mom was dating a gentleman and she had a boyfriend and so on and so forth. So I didn't live there full time, but enough to know a lot was going on out there, which really, piqued my curiosity decades later on what the heck was happening all those years ago. And, Chuck Zukowski and Christopher O'Brien, who we recently just lost, and Linda Howe did a lot with the cattle mutilations, among others. So that was kind of a topic grant that I kind of left alone for a while. Number one, it's just horrific. We're dealing with, and we'll get into the Snippy case here, but we're dealing with not only, cows and cattle, but horse and sheep and dog and many animals around our planet. So, and this is a mystery that's just decades old and still really has no solid answers to.
Okay. So your ranch is it like a hotspot like Skinwalker Ranch? Do you have the same sort of weird stuff going on?
Very much so, almost verbatim. So, it started with strange hum sounds and bangs underground, a lot like the Taos hum. We had, a rash of strange, mysterious helicopters, so much so there was a study done on it called The Choppers and the Choppers. This is a great PDF. If you guys don't have it, shoot me an email, go to my website, and I'll send you the PDF of this. It's a really cool, quick read. A lot of statistics on that. But of course, the animal mutilations, orbs, UFOs, cryptids, the hitchhiker phenomenon I certainly experienced even as a young girl and never really tied it until, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon when we really started having that discussion about this hitchhiker phenomena. So you name it, it's happened out there. And being on Beyond Skinwalker, I've got to meet a lot of the locals that are still there now, and it's continuous to this day. It's still happening. So
So you talked about Hitchhiker. Can you tell me your story? Because I've written about Hitchhiker as well.
yeah, I mean, like so many experiencers out there, probably a lot of your listeners, we all experience kind of unusual things we can't explain outside what we consider normal. And I kind of compartmentalize these different things, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Paranormal was over here where I had shadow figures in my room, like the trickster element, electronics going on and off, footsteps in the house, typically your ghost stories.
Yeah.
That is definitely a hitchhiker phenomenon. I had an experience with a basketball-sized blue orb, and that was interesting because it had just happened when I started opening up this Pandora's box. And I'm happy I journaled about it. So I want to tell all your viewers, like, whenever you have something unusual, write it down, the date, the time, what happened. And I'm glad I did that in this instance because I had forgotten my son at the time was really into Legos, and I had a Lego bucket in my bedroom, and that had fallen over in the middle of the night, which woke me up. And after I woke up, there was an auto light in the people's house behind me, and it was going on and off. And at that time, in the corner of my bedroom was this self-illuminated, like, it was seemed darker blue in the middle, and it got a little less on the outside, and it was this orb that just hovered in the corner of my bedroom. And so my husband at the time, Steve, I'm like, Steve, wake up! You need to see this. And I'm looking, I'm a debunker at heart. I like archives and research and all that. So that's my one half of my brain. So I'm looking at the fire light, the smoke detector light. I'm looking at the cable box light. I'm like, what am I looking at right now? And right as Steve got his eyes on it, it went like that.
Wow.
And what's fascinating about that, Grant, is in the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they talk about these blue orbs. And I don't know the exact quote verbatim, but basically it says, don't assume these are extraterrestrial in nature. In other words, this could be something we already have, a technology that we're using. So I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting.
But they call it the blue meanie. Do you have any trouble? Have you ever been attacked by these things? Like that's their shtick is the blue ones. You got to stay away from the blue ones. And I started a Facebook group called Orbology, and I asked all the people who are putting orb photographs on this site, and the people started sending these orb photographs of blue orbs all over the place. So, have you ever had any bad experiences with these hitchhiker effects?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, obviously, when you're 9, 10, 11-year-old little girl and you have these big shadow figures in your room, it is scary. Now, often they were in twos and threes. So, like, if you ever see an apparition of, your dear departed loved one, it's usually a apparition, not two or three. So yeah, that was terrifying to me. But these orbs, it's interesting you mentioned that because I've heard both sides. Like the blue orbs can be positive or negative, and the blue meanie, I never connected the two. But right after that encounter, I actually went through. I had bought some land up in Bailey, Colorado, very close to the Sasquatch Museum up there, so it's highly cryptid. But anyway, I bought 8 acres of land out there, and I was like, getting weeds and things off the big beautiful boulders. And I believe I got bit by something, but I'm not sure. But right after I had that blue orb encounter, I had for 2 years like this wicked rash that went like an autoimmune kind of issue going on with my body. Had the skin grafting for allergies, and tested for Lyme disease and this and that. And we never could pinpoint what really caused that. And I never really connected the two until I started reading about the blue meanies, that it could, have a bad health effect. So could have been tied to that. I don't know, but I certainly dealt with that for 2 years. And it's almost like it started and just kind of made its way through the whole body and then eventually went away with no explanation for what that was. Could have been stress. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions, Cindy, and then I'll let you jump in here because I've done a lot of work on this, and Chris Bledsoe, as you know, had the Men in Black, and I asked him, "Did you see the guy with the hat?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw that guy." And so my question was always like, if you're a shadow figure, why do you need a hat? Have you got any ideas of what this phenomena may be in terms of the weird stuff like the orbs, like you get these black helicopters, and people send me the photographs, and quite a few of them had orbs in the photograph for the black helicopter. And so the question is this to drag you down? Almost like if you listen to the interview that was done by James Lukatsky, he said this idea, we've discovered that there are men in black, like real men in black. He said, but the big question is, are they there to scare you away? Are they there to drag you in?
Well, that's a really great question, Grant, and that's kind of the premise of my work through all these years is, how much of this was government Black Access Project out there on the ranch? How much of it, was actual paranormal phenomenon, other men in black? And I can absolutely, without question, say yes, we're being monitored, meaning investigators, researchers, prominent people in the field. Absolutely, there are those folks that have eyes on us for various reasons. Even, I was a state director for Colorado MUFON for a while, and we know MUFON, the reports that come in, they're looked at. Because if we have secret technologies that are back engineered or whatever, they want to know what's being reported. What are people seeing in our skies and how are they describing it? So we absolutely know that that's a case. Now, as far as the Hat Man and, you hear the smoking dog and the jacket and these kind of crazy things. Well, something that, like I said, I like research and documents. So Dr. Leo Sprinkle, he has his body of work at the American Heritage Center out there in Laramie, Wyoming, and I've been there many, many, many times. That's
Oh,
how it culminated in that. And so we know I have documents stating, and I've done many interviews. We know that Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved at the ranch. We know NORAD knew about it. The Air Force Academy directive head knew about it. I even cornered Richard Doty one time because I was curious. We were at a conference in Laughlin, and I saw Richard Doty there. And for those who don't know, he was a disinformation officer out there, And
Yeah.
I wanted to know if he even knew about the ranch at the time, and he verified that he did. And then he also told me, where to send the FOIA for the two A-7Ds that crashed. There were two interceptors that crashed in pursuit of a UFO. He told me where to send for this FOIA. But long story
When
short,
was that? Let me state you quickly. I hadn't heard about this.
this was an interesting deal. This happened November 11th, 1975. And what's crazy about this is, and let me just tell you the story really quickly. So we know in Dr. Leo Sprinkles said they were in pursuit of a UFO. So I FOIA, it's really interesting. They claim it was an instructor and a student pilot. The student misidentifies the rotating beacon of another aircraft, but 8 of his instrumentation panel lights go out. At the same time, November 11, 1975, Edmund Fitzgerald sinks. And also there's a sighting out of Falcon Bridge, Ontario in Canada. and they are watching numerous UAPs on radar. It's being witnessed by military men and women, civilians on the ground, police officers, and they're watching these things flying over, like, I think it was 35 nautical miles over the Great Lakes, going from 26,000 feet in altitude up to 74,000 feet. So they decide to scramble two jets out of Selfridge, Michigan after these. United States Air Force on the front page of the National Enquirer. I know it's a National Enquirer, but still, they admit to
It was a good
scrambling.
reporter. It was
They
Bob
admit
Pratt.
to
He was a good
scrambling
reporter.
jets after these things. But the craziest of all, so I'm talking to Travis Walton at Contact in the Desert, and I'm like, hey, Travis, did you know about November 11th? We have 4 interceptors now being scrambled across the country. Edmund Fitzgerald goes down. That is the morning right after midnight Travis Walton returned from his abduction.
Exactly.
And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. So another collection that is housed at the American Heritage Center is Richard Haynes' collection.
Oh, okay.
And he did a ton of work with just pilot reports. So military, civilian, private pilots, and his collection, and I love this because I have my OCD side, is so organized. It's so organized. It's fantastic. So if you ever have the ability to go to Laramie, spend a weekend or a weekday digging through these archives, your mind will be blown just on the credible accounts. And from October like 2nd to November 11th, there was a huge wave of sightings across this country, in that particular time zone, especially with like pilots and commercial, even big commercial jets and everything. So I need to do more digging on that, but what a mind
Well, I
blowing.
can I'll work with you on this because I've got a lot of material I can give you. I mean, you've said Travis Walton, which nobody picked up, that there was actually if you look at the NORAD document, it was actually over Lowering Air Force Base, it was over Malmstrom Weapons Storage Area. Then Travis was taken, and it was over Minot Base where the nuclear weapons was, and it was at Malmstrom Air Force Base,
Yep.
or Wordsworth and then Malmstrom. And every night that Travis was gone, there was a report of a UFO over a nuclear missile silo or a nuclear weapon storage area. Every single night, I've got the dates and where this stuff happened. And
Right.
because I was tied in, so tying into this, Linda Howe got involved in 75. Bud Hopkins got involved in 75. I got involved in 75. In the first week of November is the first near-death experience book was published in 1975 in November,
Yep.
exactly when Travis was taken. And you get all these weird synchronicities. And Linda tells the story how she got involved. Is she got a phone call from her brother at Malmstrom Air Force Base, and he said, "Linda, there's UFOs over the nuclear weapons storage area." And she said, "There's what?" And that's how she got, because they had all the cattle mutilations around there as well. And so there was this tie into nuclear weapons. Now, you mentioned before David Perkins is one of the two. He had the biggest collection. I don't know where his collection went because he has just passed away. And Chris O'Brien, I'm not sure where his collection is, but these two guys, in one of the interviews, they talk about David Perkins' interview theory. And I don't know if you consider this. And he was involved in investigating Snippy and all the different things. And he talks about this thing about Gaia, that he claims that all cattle mutilations are downwind or downstream from nuclear power activities. Is that what you basically would agree with?
Yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, Chris was going to work with us on reopening the Snippy case and how that came to be. I mean, Snippy is before viral was viral on the internet. Snippy was the first viral worldwide animal death,
Yeah.
1967. And so the King family, about 3 years ago, knew of my connection with Colorado and Rocky Mountain Ranch, and contacted me. Long story short, I David Marler, who has the National UFO Historical Record Center out there in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, just acquired the long lost APRO files. Now, this is important for me personally because Dr. Leo Sprinkle was part of APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, and they did the investigation on the Rocky Mountain Ranch. So I was quickly in a car, it's a quick 5 hour drive over there to Rio Rancho at the archives, and I was digging through the APRO files, and here comes Dave and just he knew of my connection to the King family, which is, the Kerry King. He is the great nephew of Nellie King, who owned Snippy. And so there was this big controversy between Lady, the mother, and Snippy, the horse, and was it a male, was it a female, blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
And actually, Linda wrote the letter to this forward because I was like, kind of the disinformation started in the late 80s with Linda Howe and Chris O'Brien and others, but they didn't have access to the APRO files. So there were he sets all this down. There's a stack full of recordings, and I'll show this to you here shortly I'll share with some of the pictures that were in these files and audio recordings, hundreds of photographs, documents documenting who Snippy was, who his father was, where he was born. He was a birthday gift to Nellie. Like all this information that was lost for over 35 years just recently came back to light, which warranted Tony Angiola and I doing this book for the King family and the legacy of Snippy. So I can't wait to share this little presentation. I cut it in half just to share with your listeners, but there were so many commonalities to the San Luis Valley Snippy the horse case as to the Rocky Mountain Ranch case. And yes, Christopher O'Brien had that map of, it is downwind. And I do believe a percentage of these animal mutilations are our own military checking, water sources, ground, nuclear testing, mad cow disease. I've heard that they want the blood because they want the copper out of the blood if extraterrestrials absorb nutrients through the skin and things like that. So I believe a percentage of animal deaths are unexplained and some are us, perhaps. That being said, though, it's been what, almost 55 years, and we don't have a lot of evidence of human activity around these animal deaths, and they're still continuing. So, but the work Christopher O'Brien did, Francis E. Warren out there in Cheyenne, Wyoming, again, many UFOs spotted on radar. And it's interesting you bring up Malmstrom because when we were shooting the rockets at Rocky Mountain Ranch for Beyond Skinwalker, as this happened on Skinwalker Ranch as well, we put equipment into these big rockets and we shoot them up. And, when they come back down, we're looking at the data from the different types of equipment in the rockets. And sometimes the data will come back with a completely different location or GPS. And in the case of Rocky Mountain Ranch, it was saying that this rocket was over Malmstrom. And I'm like, what is that about? And Andy Bustamante has a connection to Malmstrom as well. So I thought that was really strange. And then Bob Salas, before he passed away, he was telling me about airmen and women stationed at Malmstrom at the time in the 70s at 75, because we have cryptids at Rocky Mountain Ranch too, these what my mom called white fuzzies. So they were like a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but they were gray. And there was a drawing actually, I might have it right here. There was a drawing of not only extraterrestrial beings out there, but this guy. And so Bob Salas sends,
Yeah.
he
Okay.
said that airmen and women stationed at Malmstrom were given lie detector tests because they were seeing these same creatures. And he sent a sketch of the one it's almost identical to this. And he's like, that's in confirmation to what you were experiencing out there at the ranch. That being said, though, I do believe one of the gentlemen that owned the Rocky Mountain Ranch, he came from San Francisco. He was part of Air Defense Command, and some of whistleblowers, I know that term is thrown around a lot, but talked about her dad being in the CIA. He recently passed away, interviewed her and her widow, and said that there was, and even in the APRA report, it said that the gentleman out there at the ranch was experimenting with legal LSD. And they were messing around with, a combination of LSD and other hallucinogens, and they called it FM, which stands for freaking magic. So I think going back to Hat Man and the Dog Man and some of these other experiences, are they having hallucinations from these combinations of drugs that we know MK Ultra and other programs were experimenting with? So that's also, what's going on there. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I got just one last question, then I'll let Cindy go with this thing. And now I forgot what the question was. Oh, yeah. In terms of cattle mutilations, what is your contention now? Is it still going on at very low levels? That's what David Perkins told me. And I have a guy outside of Skinwalker Ranch who I'm in contact. He hasn't gone public yet. He just had two, and he had one really bizarre where there's nothing left but the bones. And this is a week later, and nothing, his dog won't go near it and all this sort of stuff. And he's asking me, and I said, well, of course, it's paranormal. And it's like, he's saying, well, can the government do this? And it's like, I don't really, it looks more paranormal to me. So what would you say to somebody who's got a cattle mutilation in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a lot of yes, number one, yes, it's still going on to this day. Blew my mind. I like to look at old papers and old reports. So I was going through, I made a spreadsheet of pulling all these ranchers' names. So I was trying to contact as many as I could from the 70s that are still around. One of them, I'll just use his first name. His name's Carl. He's still a rancher. He has several hundred heads of cattle. And I go and I interview him at the South 40 in Elbert. And he, is he's sharing all this information. And he currently has cattle up here, and I'm close to Woodland Park, Colorado. He currently has cattle here in Woodland Park for 3 consecutive 4th of Julys in a row near Red Rocks Campground, which you have to remember, this is the Rocky Mountains 4th of July weekend. People are camping, people are out there. I actually did an episode for my Rocky Mountain Ranch Research YouTube channel where I went there because there's power lines, like people would hear helicopters. He had 3 cow mutilations consecutively every 4th of July. Now, this last 4th of July, we went out there and scouted it out. Of course, nothing happened. But this is a very credible man. And I tried to get him to say it's extraterrestrial, and he wouldn't go there. He dealt with the blacked out helicopters and things like this as well. But I know he believes something very unusual is happening. And again, many ranchers are having this, but they don't report it anymore because this has been going on for decades. They can write it off on their taxes often. I just did an interview with Tom and Sally Miller from Trinidad. They no longer have cattle because they lost like 16 heads of cattle to mutilations. And some of these are found in very unusual ways. And even talking with Paul Sinclair out in the UK, they have animal deaths too. Sheep. He was talking, they had a whole rash of like kangaroo mutilations,
Wow.
elk. So there's so many that are happening. And yes, it's still going on to this day. But what's really interesting about Snippy was, this was 1967 before really this was reported or known nationwide. And the telltale signs of a mutilation, the no blood, animals not approaching it, the soft tissues, but in Snippy's case, that whole front was
Yeah.
removed in his back rear left leg, and that's not really well known, but we'll get into that. But the cone of silence that we often hear about as well, where everything
Yeah.
it's just like the sound just disappears. So many just your classic signs of a true mutilation happened with Snippy even back then.
Wow, you're a fantastic researcher. I'm honored to talk to you. And I guess one more question before this ties into what Cindy talked to me about, and a lot of people have talked to me about, is when you saw the blue orb and you poked your husband. What was your husband's opinion of all this stuff?
He just, when you get woken up in the middle of the night out of a dead sleep, I think he was just trying to focus on what the heck, Katie was, and then it was just gone. And I just remember after that, I wrote in the journal right away, or like I couldn't go back to sleep after that moment, because it was just crazy, because the auto lights going on
Yeah.
and off, the Lego bucket. So there was some paranormal aspects to that as well. So
But was your husband supportive
happened
of
that
your
one
craziness?
time. It's never happened again.
But was your husband supportive of your craziness?
He was, yeah, to a
He
degree.
was. Yeah,
But he was
that's an
very,
odd one.
yeah, he was also very grounded. He raced race cars, dragsters, funny
Yeah.
cars and stuff. So he is very much in the material world, but yet very supportive as
Oh,
well.
good.
He
Good.
knew unusual things happened. So
Yeah. Go, Cindy, go ahead and then we'll do this presentation.
Okay, so how many of the mutilation do you think is ET, or is it mostly ET and some government? And how do we know that it's government?
right. I only speculate that it's government based on some things I've learned from, a percentage. And if I had, nobody's ever asked me this before, Cindy, but if I just right now, just kind of channeling, downloading, 30% is what came to me. 30% government, the rest, unusual, unexplained. I don't know why, but that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Okay.
And the reason I think part of it's government is just some of the, even in this report, some of the books I've read and magazines I've read and talking with Chris through the years and talking with Linda, we do know that Air Force was involved. One of the documents said there was a gentleman by the name of Warren. His last name was redacted out. He was on the ranch interviewing. I flew to Florida and interviewed. There was 2 sheriffs in Elbert County, George Yarnell and Bill Wall. Both of them were featured or part of A Strange Harvest, a film Linda Howe did about the animal mutilations of the time. And Bill Wall and his widow remember Air Force directive heads telling him to downplay the animal mutilation deaths, to make it go away, because people were really frightened they were going to go to humans next. This was just ongoing for, upwards of 3 years where it was just constant, almost daily. And so people were arming themselves. People were getting very jumpy. They wanted answers. And Bill Wall was told to keep it down, keep it quiet. At the same time, though, Bill Wall, that's another phenomenon we were seeing, and I witnessed this myself too. These strange, unusual boxes that we're seeing out there on the ranch property. Now, I don't know if they were back engineering something, if these were ET related, but the sheriff was on patrol. He sees a lit, it was illuminated from inside this box, like this big, and it was next to a tree, and he didn't want to approach the box. So he goes and gets a posse sheriff, and they go back in the police car, and he said it was as if the box and the tree disappeared into the ground. So these weird boxes, and Beyond Skinwalker, they filmed a lot about the box. My sister witnessed the box, I witnessed the box, many other adults witnessed the box. So it's all on film, but it just doesn't tie like the storyline to Skinwalker Ranch. So it's there, it's canned, it's just not on TV. So I'm like, they have it if they ever need it.
Yeah.
Well,
But yeah,
you'll have to write it up.
yeah,
That's your
right.
job. Go ahead,
Now,
Cindy.
have they done tissue samples like Linda Moulton Howe had with the, like, how would people know, oh, this is government, this is ET? Like Linda's research, if I remember correctly, they saw under the microscope that the laser cut was in between cells.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And that's something, Dr. Altshuler, who was a blood pathologist and examined Snippy's carcass. And he still, after, 30, 40 years looking back on the Snippy case, he still couldn't understand how his incisions, which looked like it was done with some sort of laser, it was not even malleable. It was very like leather hard, like there's no incisions or cuts. It still baffled him decades later after that. We could not replicate that with any technology that was known to him at the time. And he patented a lot of blood, I don't know how to say the word coagulation, but he did a lot of work with blood and medical things like that and patents. So he knew what he was talking about. So yeah, I don't know. So and even with Snippy, and I'll show you in the presentation, but some of the things that were at the archives and still are. So any of you out there can go and visit the National UFO Historical Record Center and hold these things in your hand, the original photos, and they had the calendar from the day ripped from the calendar off the wall, a big hand-drawn map of the crime scene, basically. And there's so much more evidence to this case than you can even imagine. But just all those telltale signs. I mean, there were no needles. There was a green ooze found and a tool, which we can talk about a little bit, but so many different unusual evidences. And yeah, they were tested. So the Condon Committee was involved in the Snippy case, and they tested this green or this black tar-like substance around Snippy's head that showed up a few days later. Also, they tested this strange tool and this green ooze. They did radiation readings. So the radiation readings outside of the area where Snippy was found, they were really high. Getting closer to Snippy, they lowered, where actually that should be opposite. So it was unusual. When they found Snippy, his skull was like it had been laying out in the desert heat for years. It was just this white, bleached white. A week later, the bones turned pink, and a week after that, they turned black. Many, many unusual things. And I can share the presentation here really quick if we want to spend maybe 10 minutes.
Just a quick question is, where is this, with the calendar and all this stuff where you mentioned this place where you can go? Where is that?
It is David Marler's. It's out of Rio
Oh,
Rancho or outside of Albuquerque, New
David
Mexico,
Marler's.
at
Okay.
Rio Rancho. It's a National UFO Historical Record Center. So he has Project Blue Book, CUFOS, NICAP, APRO, many collections, Antonio Huneeus' collection, and so many other great researchers. And yeah, like you mentioned, Grant, we don't know what happened to Chris O'Brien's work. And I know, many of us were trying to scramble to see who has that, but it really belongs there at the Historical Record Center
Okay,
because it's a
we can
treasure
go to the
trove.
presentation now, and as you're putting it on, just a note that you were at the Wyoming, the University of Wyoming. The other collection that's there is Frank Scully's collection. That's why I went there, the first Crash Saucer book, and he's got incredible amount of material there.
Yeah, there's three great collections, so it's really worth your time to spend a few days out there. And if you end up going to Rio Rancho, New Mexico, to the National Historical Record Center, you need like a couple years.
Yeah. That was the same as
No
Stanton
question.
Friedman's when I went to see Stanton Friedman's stuff. It was like they said they would take them 4 years just to sort the stuff out.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Lifetime
Okay, so let me see if I
award.
could share my screen here because I really wanted to show you
Yeah,
some of the
I think you
exciting
should be able to
documents
share.
and photos we found there in regards to the Snippy case. And like I said, I'll be presenting this tomorrow actually at Colorado MUFON, which I don't know when this podcast will air, but tomorrow's
Yeah.
Saturday when we're recording this.
And,
And this
and
is
that's in
what I
Denver?
presented at, yeah, in Denver. And you can go to coloradomufon.org if you're in the area. I hope to see you out there tomorrow. But I also presented this at Contact in the Desert last year. But I cut it in half because I know we don't have a lot of time to do here, but I
Yeah.
wanted to share at
Okay.
least some of the photos
Okay.
in
Go
this.
ahead.
Yeah,
I don't
great.
know if you can you see can you see it?
No, is it, are you sharing?
Yeah, hold on. Ah, uh-oh, what happened? Zoom.
Oh, so do I
Hold on.
have to give permission? Is that?
No, it's my thing. I think I gave the link. So,
Oh, yeah, 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 right.
oh, here it is. Okay. It's coming up
Okay,
now.
now you can see it. Okay.
It's
So now
coming.
can you see the presentation?
I can see Katie pay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there. Snippy the horse. Yeah. If you can,
Okay.
there it is.
All right.
Yep. Beautiful.
Okay. And now I just wanted to always give a little snippy warning because some of the images that you see are going to be graphic. So, can you hear the audio?
Yes, I can hear it.
No, you can hear the audio
Oh,
from the
you mean
presentation.
music? No, I don't hear anything.
I think you have to click that bottom corner, and when you open it up, it says share audio or something when you start to share.
Yeah, let me get on my glasses here and see if it'll say share audio.
I think you do it just as you go in. If you go back out again to the presentation and then the share, stop the share and then come back in again. It should be as soon as you open it, there's a thing where
Share sound. Got it. Yep.
yeah, yeah, they
Okay.
moved it. They keep moving all the stuff on Zoom, so you can't find it.
Okay. So hopefully we can hear it now.
Yeah.
All right, so so again, Snippy made headlines around the world. And this is just sort of like how this came to be. You know, up here in the upper right-hand corner is Grandpa Bob. So that is Nellie's brother. He recently passed away. Of course, if you ever want to see Snippy bones, they're at the UFO Watch Tower there with the beautiful Judy Messelin. She has that. But this picture in the lower right is a lot of the King family descendants. So, and
Wow.
of course, that's Trey Hudson and I out there out in the San Luis Valley, right around the area. So just getting to know the family and having Dave Marler acquire the APRO files. Here's a picture of kind of what he dumped on my desk when I was down there. He's like, "Here, Katie." All of these are just stacks of audio from back in the day, just folders and folders of original photos and things like that. And one of the first documents it's a 5-page document right here, but I was just floored. And basically, it talks about, Snippy was a birthday gift given to Nellie Lewis on November 14th, 1964. Snippy was born October. He was 1 day old when Nellie first saw him. He was a beautiful little colt and strutted around and showed off. So, and then they go into, his father was a registered 2-year Appaloosa. So Snippy was actually conceived in Estes Park, Colorado, by the Stanley Hotel. And then he was pastured in Denver for a couple years. And then they go into his mother, Lady, 11-year-old mare at the time owned by Burl. So much information on that. So, but here's what really was unbelievable. These are the first ever seen photos of Snippy alive. They're the only two
Wow.
in existence that we have. And
Wow.
what's really cool, so many of these pictures were written on the back, or these were in like nice folders if you go and look at them at the archives, and they're typed. So this was typed July 28th, 1969. Here is an 8 by 10 color photo I had printed up from a negative that Nellie Lewis had taken of Snippy as a colt and Lady, her mother. This is the only known photograph of Snippy as a colt. And here's Burl. Again, here it shows Burl Lewis with Lady, Snippy's mother, and Snippy as a colt. So those are the only two little pictures of Snippy alive. And what's
Wow.
really great about this is you can see the coloration of their hooves. There were 4 horses pastured, which is also something we learned. They had another horse by the name of Smokey who died the week before Snippy. And it ended up being another mysterious horse death because they thought maybe Smokey was bit by a rattlesnake because he had some swelling on his back hip. But a horse that large, a rattlesnake bite on the hip wouldn't take it down a horse. It'd have to bite you on the muzzle or the neck or the throat. So learning about that, there's Burl and Mother Lady and Snippy. So those were so cool to see and share with the King family.
Yeah.
Let me get through here. Again, this is page 4 of that document. Lady talks about the weight and the height, and Sheba was the 4th horse. These were Sheba and Lady were very gentle horses. You could feed them with sugar cubes and things like that. After Snippy's murder, they got very skittish. They were afraid of the sound of cameras, so their behavior changed drastically after Snippy was mutilated. But here's another picture, Nellie Lewis, Sheba and Lady. Here is the only picture we have. This is Nellie Lewis with Smokey. This was Smokey the horse. So, and here I hope you can hear this audio. It's Nellie talking about Smokey. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
And could you tell us also about your other animals on the range? Well, in the same pasture where Snippy has been killed, we also lost another saddle horse. We only had a total of 4, and we've got 2 left now. But also, there have been 3 animals died, and we thought, well, when the other saddle horse died, that it was probably a rattlesnake bite because there was a little swelling on the hip. This is the only evidence we found of anything on him, but he had dropped dead, it looks like. Just dropped immediately dead. Because we just assumed it must have been a snake. We couldn't understand why he was killed, but you always look for a natural reason first. In fact, I hadn't thought of supernatural until all of this happened.
So again, these are just some more photos from the archives. There were many animals. There was another ranch right next to the King Ranch. It was owned by Ernest Wellington, who actually found that strange tool in the Chico brush next to Snippy's mutilated carcass with the green ooze. He died a week later after discovering that. His daughter reached out to us from Australia, and she said, you guys got it right. I was there. That was Snippy, a 3-year-old colt. And she felt her dad's death had something to do with that strange green ooze that was discovered at the site of Snippy. But these are, they had so many animal mutilations at the Ernest Ranch, they called it the Dead Cow Ranch.
Wow.
And these are just pictures. The sick calf in Harry King Corral, Black Bull were blinded at approximately the time of Snippy's death. Sick calf in Harry King's Corral. This calf was blind and its illness was unexplainable. And here you could see, I highlighted, they had strange hoof, like their hooves would grow longer. You see, I kind of contrasted it. So and these animals were going blind. People were going blind. And again, Ernest Wellington passes away. Here's Nellie Lewis with Sheba. Notice there's no white on Sheba's legs. And Smokey, and that's Agnes King, Nellie's mother, and Nellie King. And unfortunately, Nellie ended up taking her own life the day of her mother's funeral at the cemetery there. So it's really tragic and sad. And Agnes King had 12 children and lost 6 of them before they were, it's a rough life out there in the valley, and learning about that was tragic. Again, more pictures. This is Burl Lewis, Charlie Blundell, one of the investigators. Sheba and Lady, horses that were with Snippy in pasture when killed. Sheba and Lady, mother of Snippy. Again, so we kind of match the color of the hooves of the carcass there. Another thing that isn't talked about or well known is Snippy's back left rear leg was also void of flesh and skin, just like his head and neck. So we also had the bones examined there at the watchtower, and of course you could see Snippy's bones are of a male. A female has a wider birthing canal to birth a colt or a mare or a calf. So
my husband and I, Nellie and Bill Lewis, had 3 horses pastured out at my brother's ranch, 20 miles northeast of Alamosa. The horses always came in the evening for water, and my brother often gave them grain. But on the evening of the 7th, it did not get cold. Snippy, a 3-year-old Appaloosa, did not show up. The next morning, my mother commented on it, but my brother worked in the daytime, so he said he would go look for the horse either that evening or the next morning. He didn't get to it Friday, but Saturday morning he went out to look for the colt, and he found him in an open pasture, a quarter of a mile north of the ranch house, lying on his side. Very strange circumstances.
So here's that calendar page I was telling you guys about. Really cool. I mean, at the archives, it's actually the page ripped from the calendar. You know, it has the perforations at the top and everything. But what's neat, you can see horse seen on this day, horse last seen, Snippy did not show up for feed, horse found, Wellington party found bush and tracks of tuft, Martin E. Geiger counter test radiation 8 to 10 on soil. Medina party finds green ooze. Second sighting of object. Oh, that's another thing. We have audio of Agnes King. The day of Snippy capture, she witnesses a strange craft over her house. It only made a hum sound, but it was very low to the ground. She said it was metallic in nature. And so, and she spotted this unusual craft over the ranch house twice in that week. So again, even in 1966, there were many reports in the valley of strange orbs and craft. In fact, a lot like Mount Shasta, the Mount Blanca there, which is a very sacred mountain, matter of fact, so sacred that the native warring tribes will not battle there because Mount Blanca is a sacred site. They see ships and lights and things going in and out of Mount Blanca. And of course, Snippy was found at the base of Mount Blanca. So this was another document there. You could see Snippy laying in the distance there. But it says 3 horses running illustrated below. Ben King tracked these 3 horses. The tracks went from one side of the pasture to the other. So they were tracking the 3 horses. That was Sheba, Lady, and Snippy. And they're being like zigzagged as if corralled by something. And then you see Snippy's tracks mill in a circle and then lifted. And this one says 250 feet away, and that measurement varied from one document to another, but a distance away, you can see where Snippy was dropped from above. And it's important to note that it had been raining off and on lightly those few days. So you could even see like little bird tracks because it was wet and moist. There were no footprints around Snippy, no animal tracks approached it. And so they could see that Snippy was lifted and dropped from above. And I'll show you. So you can see here, Snippy found tracks. The other 2 horses, Lady and Sheba, ran back to the ranch house. Again, this is a picture of the Chico brush that had the appearance of something going through it, very much like the Lonnie Zamora Socorro case. You can see Snippy there in the distance in the broken brush. You can see this is where they found the strange tool in the smashed brush by Snippy. Here we go. Here you can clearly see his back left hind leg was bare like his head. You can see his markings. Notice the white coloring on Snippy's front leg. This is quite large in person, but this was the map that was drawn, and it kind of shows the coyote droppings and how the coyotes wouldn't approach. Here, these circle tracks was where the horse was milling in a circle. They had 3 fence posts sheared off, which is interesting. We have photos of that. All the burn marks on the ground, circles on the ground, the tool in the brush. So much evidence in this case. Here you can see his markings good. But there's a blow up. So I think it's interesting on that they drew Snippy's Appaloosa spots, and you can clearly see they drew it so you could tell that back right leg was broken as if dropped from above.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So here's just Geiger counter testing. Again, there's that bareback leg. Now, Snippy was in the document said he was only taught to halt and lead. He was never saddled, and he was set to be trained to be saddled the week after his mutilation. He was never shod, so he never had shoes put on him. And you can kind of see that in some of these pictures here.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the most recent picture, and here you can see his Appaloosa spots and his marking on his legs. Here he's not as deteriorated. So this is the freshest picture of Snippy that we have. And I want to share this little clip of Nellie talking about this really quick. Oh, wait. Let me back this up. This is actually J. Allen Hynek asking Nellie about the photograph. So it took us a while we sent it to Paul, and he's like, yep, that's my dad. So here we go.
You have a picture of
before it's has occurred, and you have a clarification on that?
No, I don't,
But what we thought is very important is that some people have noticed the same part with the soldiers on. And the main thing is we do have something that is established.
it was the horse. It had Appalachian spots on it. We just don't, and I don't need anybody switching Appalachian bringing us on that one because it had the spots in the skin. They were not too bright as spots, but usually to see, easy to see the spots. It was definitely a horse. Yeah.
So these were the pictures that really blew my mind. So this is Lady and Sheba after Snippy's death, and these were the actual images and the words that were written. So Lady, Snippy's mother, these two horses, Sheba and Lady, were the horses that were with Snippy in pasture when killed, only witnesses to Snippy's murder. And you could see the tails down. They were really skittish after. That's what's reported in the audio and the documents. So very skittish after the mutilation of Snippy, but those are incredible. Here's another cool picture of Lonnie Zamora working with the APRO investigators, comparing the indentations in the ground and the landing sites of the Snippy site and the Socorro site. Of course, they didn't match perfectly, but I think it's cool they worked together on that case as well. Again, this is the if you could see here the Chico brush here in the photo, and this is the Chico brushes around Snippy. So kind of similar evidence left at the scenes. This was important to me. One of my Rocky Mtn Ranch experiences with my big sister, if you watch Beyond Skinwalker, we talk about the landing site, and that's where me and my sister, when we were kids, threw the Frisbee, and there was this large, dry, snowless circle that's in the APRO report. There were actually two on the ranch. And at the Snippy site, they too found these circles, and it says right here, the investigative committee measured markings on the ground and found the one to be 75 feet in diameter, same as Rocky Mtn Ranch. This is from my APRO report saying it was 75 photo. The photographer took a picture of the circle approximately 75 feet in diameter. So I think that's interesting. And then on UAP studies, look at my face on the screenshot. We had Dr. Pearson doing his dissertation on UAPs, and in his disc profile statement, 75-foot-inch diameter circles were common across multiple reports from around the world. And I was like, holy crap, because we had it Rocky Mtn Ranch and at the Snippy site. So yeah, the look on my face says it all right there.
Yeah.
Again, this is something that's interesting on the audio. They did not want this to get out to the press. These were strange tracks west of Snippy. We're in line toward a house, 7 foot measured in between tracks. There were only two of these tracks. They didn't want it in the public. They don't look like Bigfoot tracks. I don't know if they're bear tracks, but what's interesting is because the ground was so moist, why only two? It's like they came up out of nowhere, disappeared out of nowhere. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize that was present at the Snippy site were some strange tracks. Here's the, again, that image. I'm looking at these images and I'm like, what's that over the fence post? Because they're just taking pictures of these sheared off fence posts around the Snippy site, and there's a strange anomaly in that picture. So could it be a UFO? I don't know, but I thought that was interesting. Oh, come on. Okay. We'll just kind of touch on this. Some weird theories they had, they speculated somebody took a vat of acid out there and dunked them. Just ridiculous. No evidence for this was ever found. This was, people do know that Snippy was shot. There's bullet holes in his skeleton. And so, again, J. Allen Hynek, here he is talking about this. So this is really important. Here we go.
Don Richmond tells me that some kid admitted that he'd gone out and fired a couple of 22 bullets into the carcass.
The night that Dr. Osler was there, and along with about 30 other people, he came in and he said, there's a bunch of boys from Trouble shooting out there, but I made them put the guns in the back of their car and lock it up. So later, one of these boys did come to Don and Alice and said they would sign an affidavit if necessary. They had shot into the carcass. They were afraid some of us would arrest them. They didn't know whether to admit it or not. That, well, I can't see whether there's any law that says you can't shoot into a dead horse. So
Right.
I'm sure that they would sign this affidavit because Don said they would. So there were actually bullets were shot into the horse, but this was a month after he was dead.
Right, that's what I wanted to get established.
So this was the craziest theory that they were radioactive ants that ate at Snippy. I'm just like, oh my goodness. So, in the book we go through, there's a whole chapter, Ben Phillips was a sheriff out there. There's a great interview that is on audio of Ben Phillips. It's in the full presentation, but he ended up getting the nickname Lightning Ben because he thought lightning did it, and there's many reasons why that was proven not to be the case. So again, just these are all the similarities between Snippy and the Rocky Mountain Ranch: hum sounds, mutilations, helicopters, Bigfoot creatures, paranormal activity, craft UFO sightings, ET encounters, 75-foot circles, crypto creatures, military presence, strange disappearing boxes. There was actually an account of a box sighting in the San Luis Valley. I'm just going to put a word out. I lost my channel. I had 1,300 subscribers, almost ready to monetize. I had two different accounts connected to my email, and I went and a box popped up saying, "You're deleting your YouTube channel with 3 subscribers in one video." I hit delete, and I lost my channel last week. I was just mortified. Over a year's worth of work. So if your viewers could please go and hit that subscribe button, get me back on my feet again, I would really appreciate that. But yeah, really, that's kind of it. I mean, there's so much more to that, but I was really floored at how many commonalities between the Snippy case, how much evidence, how much testing was done. And the amount of documents and photos was mind blowing. I just thought it was the first mutilated horse. I had no idea all this other stuff came with it. And to have it parallel with Elbert County and the Rocky Mountain Ranch, I'm like, whoa. So again, one of those synchronicities that aren't really a synchronicity, having Leo be part of this and seeing pictures of him out there investigating, missing time stories, box stories, multiple different animal deaths out there. There were actually like 4 different horse mutilations in the valley at the time of Snippy. Snippy wasn't the only one. So just a fascinating, fascinating case.
Wow. And I'll ask you the question I asked Linda. Linda, why did they take every last drop of blood out of the cow?
Right. I mean, we all ask that, right? Because, if you're a meat eater, we want the fillets and the the T-bone steaks, and they leave that. And we're like, why do they just take the tongue and the ear and the eye and the soft tissues and the often the rectum? And another thing is a lot of calves, more calves are mutilated than full-grown cows. But why the blood? And, through Linda, like you, I hear, is it the copper in the blood? Is there some sort of a mineral or nutrients that ET needs to, in the case of the Carl Higdon case out there in Medicine Bow, Wyoming, really close to Francis E. Warren, that's another great case where he had an encounter, he's out elk hunting, he shoots, a bullet stops, falls. Great evidence on that. He encounters a box. There's actually in the archives in Laramie are photographs of a box imprint on the ground, like dead grass, just like in Elbert County. But he was floated some pills. They're like, "Here, Carl, take these pills. Are you hungry?" So the ET, which he named Also One, he assumes because he's out there elk hunting, he must be hungry. So he floats him these pills, and Carl ingests one of the pills. Actually goes to the hospital because of it later. That his truck was found miles away in this mud bog. It's a great case with a lot of evidence too. But I wonder if they're not taking these soft tissues of the animal or the blood and making food pills, like in the Carl Higdon case.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could be.
who knows?
I said to Linda, the reason they do it is because Linda, if they didn't do it, it wouldn't be weird and you wouldn't be investigating it. So like we need Linda here with her camera and we need everybody to know. I don't know what the message is, but it's so dramatic. And if you see one of these things where, it just sort of horrifies you, but then you take pictures of it and everybody talks about it and maybe that's the thing. But because you see the other weird things you mentioned, like Linda, they talk about the one where they take the heart out without any incision, or they take the calf out and stuff like that, where they wonder like how do they do this? How do they? It's almost like crop circles.
Right.
Nobody ever gets arrested, and everybody's trying to figure out is it real or not. But everybody's saying, how do they do that? How do they do that? It's like,
Right. Even Snippy's, the brain was missing. They found a white powder in his stomach cavity. Certain organs were gone. So yeah, really strange. The fluid in the spinal column. gone. So I know, other veterinarians and Dr. Altschuler, he was mystified by the condition of Snippy.
Talk about your how people contact you. I may get this farmer to contact you about his encounters, and these have just happened.
Yeah.
And what are you working on now? Are you still on the Snippy case, or are you down another rabbit hole? Because I'd like to interview you again. You're one of the better investigators I've ever come across, where
Yes.
you actually travel around. Because I said to people, like, people were putting their stuff at Rice University, and I said, how many people are going to go to Rice University? The average attention span on the internet is 7 seconds. I mean,
It is.
there's not, and you're one of the few people I've ever met that actually goes to archives like I do, and Stanton Friedman did. But most people, I mean, that's they're on their phone and that's it. So, what are you working on now? Your site. How can people contact you and help you out in your research, which I'm very impressed with.
Well, thank you, Grant. I truly appreciate that. And I have a little secret. So
Oh,
I raised 5 children, 4 boys and a daughter.
oh
And
my
I think
goodness.
it's the archive started for me because it was a great place to get away and have quiet.
I had my poor son. I was at the archives in Wyoming, and my poor kid, he was about 7 or 8 years old. He had to stand there for the whole day, sit in a chair, and while I looked at all this stuff, it felt so bad. I only stayed for one day that one time when I went because
Right,
I
right.
tortured my kids when I was doing it. So
Mine were older, so I was like, I'm jumping in the car. I'm getting away for a couple days. See ya. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I have a glass of wine too. Anyway, so that's kind of funny. But no, I do love it. I think it's fabulous. I wish more people would go visit archives. So, 2 ways you can get a hold of me. Well, three. I please, if you can check out the Rocky Mountain Ranch with Katie Page on YouTube and hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Also, you can visit me on my website, Katie, Katie, Page, Paige.net. And you can also go to Rocky Mountain Ranch Research.org. There's also a podcast link there so you can kind of see who my guests are coming up. I'd love to have you on, Grant and Cindy. It would be cool to have you guys on the podcast. I'm live every Wednesday night, so look for
Wow.
that. And I actually, the reason you mentioned Men in Black, and I'm like, yes, they're around. I've been approached by a couple very interesting people through the years, but there was you asked what rabbit hole I'm going down now, and I'm hoping to kind of share all this at Contact in the Desert this next year. But I've been researching Brigadier Arthur Exon's rumor that one of the Roswell bodies ended up in a mortuary outfit in Denver. So I've been to the Eisenhower archives. We know Mamie's from Denver. There's a Mason connection. Interviewed the mortician out in New Mexico a couple times. There was a body stored in a mortuary outfit in Denver for decades. He didn't
Wow.
think there was a body in it. He pulled his caper. He wrote a little book. It's in my cabinet over there. Long story short, there's a federal judge that was appointed by Nixon so I went and pulled a lot of his research and data. Um, Interestingly enough, he was the crash retrieval specialist for airline crashes, and he was also the infectious disease judge appointed by Nixon who did like toxic shock syndrome and other things like that. Here's the craziest synchronicity, one of the crazier ones in my life. My mother, this was before COVID. So my mom asked me to go to her nursing home to do UFOs 101. I'm like, oh, certainly I'll do that. So I put together a presentation. I had a really good group, 35 maybe people there, did UFOs, and I was talking about the Roswell body case and the Denver connection and this federal judge. And they're like, oh, his widow's on the fifth floor. You want me to go get her?
Oh
Wow.
my
So
God.
I did 2 interviews with the federal judge's widow, and which tied together pieces of the puzzle. I went and got a lot of documents from the Eisenhower archive. So I do believe I know where this little Roswell body was taken. I do believe it's real, and I believe that the reason one of the bodies came to Fitzsimmons Lowry is because there was a certain organ or something that they had a specialist here. We know, talking to Don Schmidt, that we had soldiers out from Lowry at the Roswell crash site. So I've been piecing together this whole Denver piece of the Roswell puzzle, and that is my new rabbit hole, and I hope to get all that information out soon this next year. So.
Wow. Well, maybe when you got it ready before you will promote your lecture, because fascinating. I mean, again, not many people go to. I've been to Eisenhower Library, I've been to the Nixon files and stuff, but nobody goes there. It's like when I was at the Clinton Library, I was the only one there, and
Right.
the guy fell asleep. The guy was there to watch me, and so I figured like he was totally bored, and I got a picture of him sleeping in front of the room. It's like. People figure there's lots of people, and there's literally nobody there. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah. So
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you. I'm honored to meet you. And anything you want to talk about, Cindy, before we go?
So the Roswell, everybody, when they hear of the Roswell incident, they're thinking of the Matt Brazelton case. So there were two crashes. So which one must have been the second crash that they had? They found a live ET, right?
Well, what's interesting about that is, so in this little pamphlet that Lou wrote about his caper encounter with this body that was stored at this outfit Endeavor, the only reason I connected, and he connected it, so he wasn't into aliens or ETs or anything like that. Him and his wife, he's a mortician, right? He is an embalmer, so he's out there hang gliding in Roswell and learned of the Brigadier Arthur Exxon. And then all of a sudden it was like, because my first question was, well, why didn't you take pictures of it? He says when he opened this vault, it was a vault within a vault within a vault. He said there were 7 layers of formaldehyde cloth over the body. He said all the visceral was removed, the genitals were cut out, orifices for ears, really heavy brow, but he didn't think extraterrestrial. He thought severely hydrocephalic child.
Oh, wow.
And he was mortified. His eyes were watering. He could not believe there was a child in this coffin for all these decades. He was mortified. So it's interesting. And I only tie it to the Roswell crash site because of the Brigadier Arthur Exxon's rumor. Now, there were other crashes, the Aztec, for example, that supposedly had, 11 or 12 bodies and things like that. So could it have been another extraterrestrial body from another crash site in New Mexico? Possibly. In interviewing the federal judge's widow, her husband was in New Mexico all the time at different crash sites. So it's fascinating. I wish I knew more. I know there was a whole wave of things happening out there in New Mexico at the time. So, that's the only reason I connected to the Roswell crash specifically, is because of the rumor from Exxon. But we don't know that for certain.
But you're digging, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot more details when we come back to you again for another interview, because I'm just fascinated with research. Fantastic.
Thank you.
See, I find good
Honored
people.
to meet you. Yes, you did. That was excellent. Excellent. So we'll stay in touch. I'll give you that information I've got on the November 1975, because that's when I went down the rabbit hole. And as I mentioned, there was it was Stephen Greer's first C5 encounter. That he hosted. Bud Hopkins was that year. Linda Howe started that year. It was like everybody went down the rabbit hole, 75. And it was the main one for the cattle mutilations. It was just crazy city with cattle mutilations, where, guys with guns shooting anything that moved in the sky. And even what's his name? Randall tells a story about flying his helicopter for Army or whatever, and farmers shooting at him and stuff like this. It's like,
I know
it was a wild time, 75.
I'll tell you, Grant, I'd love to come back on, because we did, like I said, I know there was a MK Ultra military presence, and I was put into this program here it's called the Twilight Learners. So these are my tapes. It's a biofeedback, because I started the scariest night on the ranch. I got migraine headaches, and I was put into this Twilight Learners program where they keep you in theta state, and you raise and lower your hand temperatures and things like that to control the migraine headaches. Well, I started doing research on Thomas H. Badinsky. He was a navigational engineer out of Area 51, worked on the SR-71 Blackbird, and worked with the Menninger Foundation, the Monroe Institute, the Stargate, and the Gateway Project. It's all tied together. So there's no question this program I was put in, I actually found a video from the 70s where they're working with a little boy named Kevin, and they're like hooking him up to the biofeedback program I was a part of. And, hey, Kevin, can you make the rocket go up? Can you make the rocket land? And the fact that this person who invents the biofeedback, Twilight Learners, was a navigational engineer out of Area 51, it's all coming out. I mean, there's that whole side of it that, they were trying to experiment with. If they had back engineered craft, they didn't know how to fly them, and all that's coming out too. So I could come back and we can do a deep dive.
Yeah, we can do that, because I actually bring my assistant Desta Barnaby, who's just finished a book on children in MK Ultra. She was part of a program where these children, special children, and the book is apparently, she told me I get to read it. She's finished it, and she was involved in this whole thing and the psychiatrist and all this sort of stuff. And you see me going down the same rabbit hole where children don't have the left brain in locked in yet, and they're very intuitive, and they use these children for research purposes.
Absolutely. I'd love to get in touch with her
Yeah.
because I too have learned, you're either in the talented and gifted programs, or in my case, I was diagnosed, and for the 70s, it's like you're hyperactive, no sugars, no artificial colors, but ADHD, trauma, and learning disabilities, dyslexia, those kind of things. So I was on that end of it, but I also hear the gifted kids. So I think they were using both or experimenting with both. And then I had a half brother who was in a state hospital, and we darn well know they experimented with a lot of people that had mental illness or were in state hospitals. So that's another link and connection, and could be why we were put out there at Rocky Mountain Ranch to begin with. So that's a whole other side of this
Wow.
that I would like to get more exposure to, because it's a rabbit hole I'm recently going down. So if you can
Yeah.
get me in touch with her, I would love to talk to her
Yeah,
about
we'll
her
we'll do
research.
that. And the other thing that just popped into my head is the interview. I don't know if you follow Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan talks about the 7-hour briefing. He's told to get a room inside the CIA, and the guys that come in to brief him have as many tickets as he has, and they are not no they can walk around the CIA without escorts. And he said they scared the living daylights out of him in a 7-hour briefing on UFOs. And then they said, well, had they made some progress? He said, yes. On UFOs, no. On what? Telekinesis, psychic phenomena. And apparently and Jim Semivan said for 3 months he was walking around and he just was not normal. He could not believe that they'd done. They said, you want a second briefing? He said, no, I've heard enough. And the idea that they have back engineered the psychic elements of all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, they use kids and LSD and anything that would get them there. So I'll put you in contact with Dessa. She'd love to talk to you. Maybe we'll have to do it quickly before she publishes her book, because then she'll want to pull the book and add another chapter or something.
I appreciate that. Thanks, you guys, so much for having me.
Thank you.
Oh my
And
God, yes, Katie.
Good luck
we
with
love
your
you.
lecture.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Namaste.